I'm Robin Gagnon.
And I'm Eric Gagnon, and we sell restaurants. We started the nation's largest restaurant brokerage firm, We Sell Restaurants, over a decade ago. You can find us online at WeSellRestaurants.com.
We are on your radio once a week with the leading authorities in this business, talking about subjects trending in the restaurant industry. Tweet your questions while we're on the air. Our Twitter handle is Sell Restaurants, or post on our Facebook page. It's facebook.com/We Sell Restaurants. If we don't get to your question, we'll follow up on our social media channels.
Our goal is to satisfy your appetite for acquisition, feed the need for restaurant reality, and serve up a recipe for business success. If you have any ideas or question about the show, you can email me. My email is eric@WeSellRestaurants.com.
Today, we are so excited to be talking to Jim Sullivan, CEO and founder of Sullivision, the food service and retail industry's #1 resource for results-driven training tools and programs. Mr. Sullivan is an award-winning restaurant operator, a visiting professor at Penn State University, Purdue, the University of Delaware, Cal Poly, and the Culinary Institute of America. He's a graduate of the University of Colorado and lives in Wisconsin with his wife and children. You may have seen him. He's been on CNN, NBC, ABC, Fox News, and the Food Network. Maybe you've read his insights on strengthening leadership, performance, and profitability in the Wall Street Journal, New York Times, USA Today, or Fast Company and Inc. Over 750,000 leaders, executives, and franchisees worldwide have read his newsletters, books or columns, seen his DVDs, webinars, e-learning programs, and live seminars.
Sullivan's a veteran of over 20 years in the hospitality and retail industry. He's worked for and with companies as distinct as Walt Disney Company, Target, McDonald's, Apple, and Starbucks. Not a theorist, Jim is well known as a brand builder, motivator, trend spotter, and problem solver. He has built his reputation designing successful leadership, sales, marketing, and customer service programs for the top 200 food service and retail chain. He is the author of 2 books that have sold over 400,000 copies worldwide, including the bestseller Fundamentals, 9 Ways to be Brilliant at the Basics, and Multiunit Leadership, the 7 stages of building high-performing partnerships and team. His DVDs called Jumpstart, The Art of Effective Pre-Shift Meetings, and The Shift are being used in over 30,000 restaurants worldwide. Jim is here to share his thoughts with our listeners today. Welcome to the show, Jim.
Thank you very much. Excited to be here.
Great. Well, let's just kick this off because, Eric and I have seen you speak. We've bought your books. We're just huge fans, and I know a lot of our listeners are too. You have so much knowledge in this industry. So let's start with something that you can give us some insight on that everyone seems to agree on, and that's service. You talk to a dozen entrepreneurs in this business, and they all say service is important. But if everyone understands this, Jim, what's your take on why service is so hit or miss in the industry?
Yeah, service is our invisible product, as almost everyone knows. And the thing about service is that good service can save a bad meal, but a good meal cannot save bad service. And yet, as we try to execute on service, it becomes more and more complicated. I think one of the reasons is that most operators mistake what service is. They confuse service with hospitality. Service, for instance, fulfills a need. Hospitality, on the other hand, fulfills people. So you can get service from an ATM machine, for instance, but you can't get hospitality. So if a restaurant sit-down meal experience is and quick but not friendly or connecting or hospitable, it's going to fulfill a need but not the people. So that being said, you can see, and by my definition anyway, its implications are that hospitality is complex. Well, maybe the best way to put it is what I heard from a mentor years ago. Service is simple. Simple is hard.
I love that quote.
That is for sure. Jim, you've worked with so many brands. Some of the most successful brands in the world, and everybody's always kind of looking up to some of the bigger brands, and say, what are they doing that can reproduce in my little world, to be successful? So, in your opinion, what are some of the 3 things that most successful food service brands have in common?
Yeah, and I think even I think I know what those three might be, at least in my experience. But I would say it's not only big brands or chains that have this in common, but it's the small independent operators, the people who have a successful one restaurant, 2 or 3 restaurants in a market, or large independent operators in a particular market. I think they share these 3 key strategies, and that is focus, number 1. They focus on the things they can control, not the things they can't control. They focus on training, hiring, service, quality, value, team development, talent pipeline. They focus on those things. They don't focus on the things they can't control, such as weather, oil prices, government regulation. They're concerned about those things, but they put their focus on the things that drive their business. The second thing I think all successful operators have in common is building strong teams. If you don't have a strong team in place, you cannot serve, you cannot sell, you cannot market, you cannot succeed, because it may say Joe's Restaurant on the sign out front, but it's Mary, Kathy, Doug, Chanel, Raphael who are deciding whether or not the guest is coming back, because that's your customer-facing team member. So if you don't spend your time developing your people and always having a talent pipeline and a strong team in place, I think that's the second key building block of a successful brand or company. And third, it's execution. Knowing what to do is one thing, but actually executing on it each and every day is the most important thing. Let's face it, if you wanted to build the optimized, perfect business, whether it's a restaurant or a retail store, you could Google today 23 million solutions on how to operate a perfect restaurant or a perfect retail store, maybe 100 million solutions. It's all there on the web. Or you could go out and buy 200 books and research the best ideas on it. You could literally, on paper, compile a perfect scenario for a perfect, profitable business. So, given that all that information is available out there, why doesn't everybody succeed, and succeed wildly? It's because of execution. Ideas are easy. Execution is hard. So, I'd say focus, strong teams, and execution might make up the 3-legged stool of any successful restaurant, and certainly any successful business.
Oh, I think that's great. And you know, sometimes folks get started and they have that 3-legged approach that makes them successful, and they knock it out of the park with Unit 1, Unit 2. We read your book, Multi-Unit Leadership, and you talk about a theory where sometimes those unit counts start to stall or reach a breaking point. Tell our listeners a little bit about that. Is there a place where what you've been doing isn't going to work anymore if you start to grow, and what are those common breaking points?
Yeah, that's a simple and great question with a complex answer, but I'll try to add as much clarity as I can to it, because, of course, all circumstances are different. But if your question is, why do certain brands or businesses get to a certain level and not succeed while other brands do or other teams do it? It's a great question. You know, why do some teams outperform other teams doing the exact same work? Why do some franchisees within a food service brand, why are they wildly successful, while other franchisees in similar markets fail to have the same success? I think, not surprisingly, based on your last question and one of my previous answers, is I think first and foremost it's because of a lack of a talent pipeline. In my own experience in opening up to, I guess, dozens, if not hundreds of restaurants with a great team, I will tell you that if you don't have a talent scaffold in place, if you don't have a strong bench strength, what will happen is your first and second units will do good, because you'll be very careful about who you allow on your team. You'll spend a lot of time developing them, getting them acclimated to your culture, to your values, to your mission, to how to treat guests. And then suddenly you open a third or fourth restaurant, and you get busy. You get pulled in 4 or 5 or 6 or a dozen different directions. And maybe you drop some of your standards about who you hire because you're in a hurry. You're trying to get open in a new market, and this person doesn't seem right. But you know what? They'll get better later. And so we hurry hire, and we put the wrong people in place. And maybe in spite of picking the wrong person, we continue to be successful, and we open our 6th or 7th or 8th restaurant. And suddenly we're focused on times with with lending capital, with bankers. Our time gets diffused in marketing. Our time gets diffused meeting with realtors and people who lease us properties, and we don't put as much time into picking the right people.
I love that term, we hurry hire, because I think even as restaurant brokers operating a restaurant brokerage franchise, we have definitely been guilty of that in the past.
Yes, we did.
Well, I think everybody has, and I know how we justify it. I've done it with our own places. We say, well, this person probably isn't the right person, but Mary is an awesome trainer, and she'll figure it out. She'll train them, she'll develop them, she'll make it work. But yeah, I guess we've all found out that there's no right way to develop the wrong person.
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah, and so I think lack of a talent pipeline would be number one reason why food service brands or franchisees grow to a certain level and then seem to stop. The second thing I think would be a lack of a scalable, effective system. That you're unable to replicate your quality in your kitchen. You're unable to replicate your leadership systems. Maybe you're hiring or developing the wrong managers. You may not be able to replicate your marketing in different markets. So, number one, lack of talent pipeline. Number two, lack of scalable, effective systems. And number three, and I'm sure both you and many of your listeners would say this might be the number one. And number three is lack of capital.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't have the money, the lenders, the revenue stream, that is going to be huge. But ironically, and I point this out to all the brands we consult with, big and small, restaurants don't go out of business because they didn't make enough money. They go out of business because they spent their money on the wrong things.
Mm.
That is so true. That is so true. Hey, Jim, I know you when you speak and you meet people. I know we see you speak, and it's standing room only most of the time, and you've met a lot of the leaders in the industry, and from small companies to large companies, and some people have done some phenomenal things in the industry, and some people have failed different things. But what are some of the key traits of the successful leader in the food service industry that you observe over the years?
Yeah, I think I'm going to be a little redundant here because I'll start with focus. They focus. They focus on what's most important to their business. They seem to be distracted less than other operators. So I would say focus would be a big thing, and not surprisingly, again, hoping I don't sound too redundant, it would be building strong teams. I think the third thing would be that they're nice to the people with the money. They really, really focus on their service and hospitality. They recognize that, despite the demands a guest puts on one's operation, that they're the reason they're in business. So I think that's important. I also think that they understand how to merchandise a menu. I think they understand that to sell is to serve, and a lot of operators don't see that. They think that guests will automatically know what's best, and I think it's important to teach your team, whether you're in a quick serve operation or a full service operation, how to suggestively sell, how to merchandise the menu. And I think another thing that a great operator does is that they have this mindset: always be marketing. Always be marketing. They think of marketing as a philosophy and not a department. And I think that they out-teach the competition, that they develop their people daily. Again, a mentor of mine years ago told me, if you don't spend all your time training, you're going to spend all your time training. So, train, focus, and develop people every day. Look, I know for sure one of the things that any of your listeners out there, if they're directly involved in operating restaurants, thinking about operating restaurants, lending to restaurants, leasing to restaurants, planning to open their own restaurant someday, one of the key things we'll all agree would be finding great people. But you can't find great people today. There's A-level players, B-level players, C-level players, and D-level players. Everybody wants A players, but they're employed somewhere else. They're not coming in looking for a job. People are happy with them. They keep them happy. So who comes in looking for work? It's not even the B players so much, but the C and D players. And I'm sure all of your listeners would agree with that.
Right.
So if that's true, and it is, I think, and based on our experience, then you better be really, really good at developing people to take those C players that come in and make them into A or B players and then A players. So I think that's going to be a really, really important tool. It has been in the past, but it's an important tool going forward in this highly competitive talent market that we all find ourselves in, because obviously we're competing not only with the plethora of restaurants in our markets, but also we're competing with all the retail stores as well. So, and just to that point, if I could add one other thing, there's two types of C players. The C players who can progress to B players or E players, or A players or B players. And then the other type of C player is the one who's only going to be a C player. And you have to understand, who those people are and determine if they can progress. And if they can't progress, you need to do the main thing and give them a job at the competition.
And speaking of trying to develop those folks, those C players, and take them to the next level, is that a different scenario today when we're dealing with millennials and Gen X? Tell us a little bit about this Gen Next generation. Who is that, and what are they looking for in terms of training? Does it differ from what we've been doing in the past?
I think so, because they were brought up with different expectations. First and foremost, I want to say that whenever I see the speakers out there who contrast baby boom generation or Gen X with Gen Y, or the so-called millennials, the millennials are anyone from approximately the age of 16 to the age of 24, who form really the core cadre of employees in the food service industry. I think they're awesome. I really do. And I take exception when I hear speakers and authors talk about the values of previous generations being more solid, being more American, being more traditional than this generation. Whenever I hear those people espouse that, it reminds me of a manure salesman with a mouthful of samples. It just doesn't sound right, because I'm sure every generation looked at the next generation and said, "Oh, you're not as good as us." I'm sure that happened with my parents and my grandparents and great-grandparents, etc. So I think we need to get that prejudice out here that they are different, but we're not better. So, they do learn differently. This is the first generation to come of age being totally technology immersed. Any of your listeners out there who have children know, when in doubt with your smartphone or computer, you turn to your kids, fix this, and they fix it.
Right.
So that is a touchstone for how people learn. I think in my generation, you were given a training manual, or you were sat down in front of a 1-hour-long orientation video. This generation gets a lot of insight and information in info nuggets, in chunks. And I think that's the way to train and teach today. God forbid if you still have a margin-to-margin printed training manual, or a lot of people just take their training manual with that same text and they put it online and they call it e-learning, and it's just as bad. So I think visuals. I think if for your readers out there, think USA Today versus New York Times. If you can picture that kind of layout, so very visual, info nuggets, chunked, tight information. And I think you should train people daily. I think, and I know I had the pleasure of speaking at an event in Florida that you guys were at, and I know you probably heard me talk about the pre-shift meeting. And there, to every operator, and very quickly for your listeners, there's your solution. You have 2 shifts a day, 14 shifts a week, 56 shifts in a month, 168 shifts every quarter, 672 shifts in a year. What if you had a 90-second or 2-minute pre-shift meeting before every shift? What if you taught somebody something new in 2 minutes every day? A year from today, you'd be better at 672 things. And that would make your restaurant more profitable, your people more professional, and your performance more exemplary.
I think that was absolutely. We heard that at the speech that you gave, and it absolutely is a way, because everybody who says, "I don't have time to train," you just gave them that time, and it's nothing off the time clock. It's not pulling everybody away, and then somebody leaves, and you have to repeat it. And to your point, I do think that folks, we sort of have a very rapid attention span these days. We want to hit something on our cursor, have it return an answer. So that learning, everybody's modified to, they want that quick instant action or answer so they can get it easily in a quick training program.
Yeah, and that means, of course, and you bring up a good point, that means that the owner or the manager has to be a repository of quick answers and quick knowledge, too, because if a millennial team member is used to, with his or her smartphone, getting an answer, accessing information, they would have to turn to their manager, and that manager has to be a clear and decisive leader, too, which opens up a whole other discussion, I guess. But if you think about it, we ask them not to use their phones during the shift, but they millennials today will take more bathroom breaks than any other generation. And at first you're thinking, oh my gosh, there must be a problem here.
Something's wrong with the water, right?
Yeah, gosh, this is I've never seen such a generation with this problem going to the bathroom. Well, of course they're checking their phones, and it's a continuous problem. But if you think about the bigger picture, this means that the managers need to be clear, decisive, have solutions, and see when people are struggling, because this industry gives that millennial generation often their first job, right? And an 18-year-old in a restaurant or a 17-year-old, you know what? They don't want a career. They want a car.
This is Eric and Robin Gagnon, the Restaurant Brokers. We have been talking to CEO and founder of Sullivision, Jim Sullivan, as we satisfy your appetite for acquisition, feed the need for restaurant reality, and serve up a recipe for business success. You can see all our listings online and download this show at WeSellRestaurants.com. That's WESELL restaurants with an S.com.